Presidential candidate Kamala Harris has selected mostly peaceful Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. Mostly peaceful Walz won the spot after Kamala rejected Pennsylvania Governor Joshua Shapiro. The rejection of Shapiro was not due to anti-Semitism, according to DNC spokesman Mohammed Jihad Akbar. Akbar said Kamala was just worried Shapiro might be mistaken for a Jew by Democrats and other people who don't like Jews. Shapiro had tried to circumvent the issue by changing his name to O'Connor and publicly eating a ham and cheese sandwich, but his efforts failed when Democrat operatives discovered an op-ed he had written in college in which he said a Palestine-Israel two-state solution might be difficult since everyone in Palestine has sworn to murder everyone in Israel. Between bites of his ham and cheese sandwich, Governor O'Connor apologized for the op-ed, saying he had written it when he was young and still believed honesty was the best policy. He also apologized for serving in the Israeli Defense Forces under the mistaken impression IDF stood for International Disney Funhouse. And he apologized for praying in Hebrew, saying he could have sworn it was Latin. But after much thoughtful deliberation, Democrats still felt there was just something a little Jewy about the guy and sent him home, saying his integrity would be returned to him at a later date if they could find it. So, the position fell to mostly peaceful Tim Walz, who earned his nickname after allowing Minneapolis to burn to the ground during the mostly peaceful George Floyd riots. Governor Mosley said he would have sent the National Guard into Minneapolis sooner, but his wife was enjoying the smell of American in flames, and he just loves that woman so much. Journalists and other Democrats immediately went to work trying to frame Governor Mosley as a moderate, describing him with words like folksy, Midwestern, and not entirely Stalinist. An editorial in the New York Times, a former newspaper, said, quote, "Progressivism is great, but Governor Mostly Peaceful is not progressive. But if he were, it would be great. But he's absolutely not. Though it's totally great he is, if he were, which we assure you he isn't, but it's a great thing to be, though he's not." Unquote. Still, there are some signs that the mostly peaceful, folksy Midwesterner might be just a tad to the left of, say, the people he allowed to burn down Minneapolis. For instance, Governor Mosley once said, quote, "One man's socialism is another man's neighborliness," which of course is true if another man's neighbor steals all his money at gunpoint and distributes it among his political allies. Governor Mosley also signed a bill allowing Minnesota doctors to cut off a child's if the child believes he's the opposite sex. Kids who believe they're pirates can also have one eye removed and one of their legs replaced with a wooden peg. And if they believe they're Superman, doctors are allowed to throw them off the top of a building. The law, called the Fantasy Affirming Care Act, was largely written by Richard Levine on the walls of his cell in Arkham Asylum before he escaped to resume his reign of terror as supervillain Admiral Rachel. Some Minnesotans protested the Fantasy Affirming Care Act, saying it robbed parents of their rights, but those protesters fell silent after mostly peaceful Governor Tim Walz passed a new abortion law, allowing a child to be aborted right up until the moment he learned not to criticize mostly peaceful Governor Tim Walz. Governor Mosley said the law, called the Cat Lady Affirming Care Act, was meant to ensure Minnesota women would have no stake in the future and would therefore feel perfectly comfortable with socialism. Governor Mosley made his first appearance as a VP candidate at a huge rally of Democrats who were absolutely thrilled to be voting for animate, sentient human beings, whoever the hell they were. As the governor spoke, one enthusiastic voter told reporters, quote, "I am so happy we have candidates who will continue the policies that have left America weak and broke on the verge of World War III. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go join my husband on stage." Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show. We are back laughing our way through the fall of the Republic. It is a great time to become a DailyWire Plus member to enjoy the fall of the Republic even more. DailyWire Plus members have unlimited on-demand access to our uncensored, ad-free daily shows, real-time breaking news, and investigative journalism. Don't be left in the dark. Join us in the fight. Join the fight. Something like that, something about fighting. You want to join us now at dailywire.com/subscribe, dailywire.com/subscribe. Also a great time, if you really want to enjoy the fall of the Republic, to get pre-order my new Cameron Winter mystery novel, A Woman Underground. It, in fact, involves the fall of the Republic, a really tough mystery story. And I just finished the new one, so there will be a follow-up to it, A Woman Underground. Please pre-order that on Amazon. It really helps us a lot, helps us to try and get this thing on the New York Times bestseller list, though I know they kept the last one off, and we'll see if they do it again. Also, listen to our interviews on Wednesday. Last Wednesday, we interviewed Maureen Callahan, who wrote Ask Not, about the women the Kennedy family has destroyed. I'm just about to finish it. Absolutely a riveting book. And this week, we'll have Joel Pollack from Breitbart. He's got a book called The Agenda, What Trump Should Do in His First 100 Days. And finally, leave a comment, because if that comment offends both God and man, we will read it on the show. If it only offends God, maybe. If it offends man, probably. But if it offends both God and man, we will read it right here. Today's comment is from Jenna Aiello 722, who says, I understand that Christians were offended, rightfully so. This is talking about the Olympic display of the Last Supper with drag queens. I understand that Christians were offended, and rightly so. But the worst thing, much worse, was men beating up women and getting a trophy for it. See, I kind of like that. I explained to my wife, I've been treating my wife with respect and love and tenderness for 50 years. But I said to her, now the Olympic Committee says I can just clock her. So that'll be a lot easier. All right, let's get to today's episode, the Zero Reality Election. I want to begin with a Klapback letter I got. Obviously, if you want to send a letter to Klavan Klapbacks, write Klavan Klapbacks at DailyWire.com, both with a K, Klavan and Klapbacks at DailyWire.com. We love to hear from you, and we love to hear your comments on the show. This is from Joshua. He says, Dearest Andrew Klavan, Dark Prince of Chaos and Satire, that is on my business card. Now that Democrats have defenestrated Joe Biden like a Russian opposition party leader, I thought it would be a good time to look back at the evil party versus stupid party segment you did. In that segment, you said that the first party to ditch their unpopular leading candidate, i.e. Trump or Biden, would likely win the presidency. You then prophetically predicted that the Democrats would be the ones to do it because they are, of course, the evil party. If your prophetic wisdom proves true yet again, then Trump is seemingly set to lose the upcoming election. What are your predictions now that Joe is officially out? So I will tell you that right now I've got, I won't say a red light on, but it's orangish light. I'm very concerned. I don't know why, but Trump seems to have been taken off guard by Kamala Harris, which is weird because we saw him on that golf cart saying, Kamala Harris, I got rid of Joe Biden and now Kamala Harris is going to be next. And yet he just seems thrown by it a little bit, or maybe he was being shot in the head. That sometimes throws you off a little. I know the 3 or 4 times I've been shot in the head, it's kind of gotten my game a little bit off. So that might be it. But he's stumbled a little bit. And I think that for reasons I'll explain, I think that Kamala Harris has in fact, increased enthusiasm among Democrats who were not going to vote because they thought Joe Biden wasn't sentient anymore and they couldn't bring themselves to vote for them. And that's an important thing. And listen, the Democrats wanted to run against Trump. He is the most dangerous candidate. Other candidates, I think, for instance, Nikki Haley would have been a much stronger candidate to win, but then you would have been stuck with Nikki Haley. And so we're going through a revolution in the Republican Party. We want it to become a more Trumpy party, but you don't get that with other candidates who would be safer choices because they're more establishment. There's still time. Trump says he is not worried. He says that soon Kamala's honeymoon will be over. This is cut 19.
I will say this. When people find out about her, I think she'll be much less. And I see it right now. I see her going way down to the polls now. Now that people are finding out that she destroyed San Francisco, she destroyed the state of California along with Governor Gavin Newsom. He's been a terrible governor, terrible. But they did it together. And she was early. I mean, she was the first of the prosecutors, really. Now you see Philadelphia, you see Los Angeles, you see New York, you see various people that are very bad. But she was the first of the bad prosecutors. She was early. Oh, it's going to end. The honeymoon period's going to end.
So the reason I say I'm a little concerned is because what the Donald is talking about there is reality. But reality is playing absolutely no part in this campaign, which is what I want to talk about today. This is reality TV, which means fantasy, a fantasy version of reality, a stage version of reality. And the question is not who's the better candidate, which are the better policies, but the question is whether the American people will wake up from an induced dream, a dream that is being induced by a powerful media consortium on behalf of the powerful people they represent and defend, because freedom requires realism. Freedom is for tough guys and tough girls. Freedom requires realism. People sleepwalk into slavery, which is the normal state of humankind, and that's what the elites who have captured our culture are trying to engineer. They're trying to engineer a dream in which we can drift into their power. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like taking a call on speaker in a crowded train. Do you really want all those strangers listening in on your private conversation? Because all your traffic flows through their servers, internet service providers can track every single website you visit. In the United States, these providers are legally allowed to collect and sell that information to third parties like advertisers. But who knows who else they might be selling it to? That's why I never use the internet without using ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN reroutes 100% of my traffic through secure, encrypted servers so that no one can see my browsing history. It's none of their business. There are lots of other VPNs out there, but I choose to use ExpressVPN for a couple of reasons. One, the app is easy to use. All I have to do is open it, click one button. Instantly, it protects my internet activity. Even I can push one button. Two, the app works on all my devices, my phone, my laptop, my tablet. No matter how I'm accessing the internet, ExpressVPN is working in the background. Three, they're rated #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge, people who know a lot more about this stuff than I do. Protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/Klavan. That's expressvpn.com/Klavan. And you can get an extra 3 months free if you sign on to expressvpn.com/ how do you spell it? It's Klavan. No E's in Klavan. I just make it look this easy. All right, we start with Chapter 1, Mamma Mia. Now, Megyn Kelly reminded me, I was talking to her yesterday on her show. She is absolutely great, by the way. She does such a great show. And she reminded me of this wonderful clip of Drew Barrymore, who now has a talk show, talking to Kamala Harris.
We all need a mom. I've been thinking that we really all need a tremendous hug in the world right now. Yeah. But in our country, we need you to be Mamala of the country.
Now, I happen to love Drew Barrymore. When I work out at the gym, she's always on the TV above me, and you don't hear the sound, but you can just see she kind of personifies. She's like all of Hollywood distilled into a single human being. She lives in a completely solipsistic, self-interested fantasy world, and she sells this to the women in her audience. In fact, over at the American Mind, a really good site, Peachy Keenan has collected all the reports of what a screaming witch Kamala Harris is. And as opposed to being Mamala, she writes from the Daily Mail. She says, congressional sources told the Mail that Kamala would berate subordinates in expletive-laden tirades. This has been from a lot of sources. Then State Operation Director Kelly Melkenbacher slammed her boss, Kamala, saying, I have never seen an organization treat its staff so poorly. It's not a place where people feel supported, but a place where people feel treated like crap, one source said. A Biden administration official claimed Harris was responsible. It all starts at the top. In the Washington Post, multiple staffers who worked for Harris before she was vice president told the Washington Post in December 2021 how she'd reportedly refuse to prepare for public appearances and blame her aides when she then underperformed. One aide said, with Kamala, you have to put up with a constant amount of soul-destroying criticism and also her own lack of confidence, so you're constantly sort of propping up a bully, and it's not really clear why. But Drew Barrymore, this imagination meister, this person who wants to create the imagination of America, she wants Kamala to be Mamala and hug us and take care of us. But the problem is that Mama is Mia. She is MIA. She is missing in action. Here is Trump at his last press conference talking about that. Cut 20.
She hasn't done an interview. She can't do an interview. She's barely competent, and she can't do an interview. But I look forward to the debates because I think we have to set the record straight.
And this is absolutely true. She hasn't talked to anybody except until this, which pressured her into giving like a 70-second exchange with the reporters outside her plane. J.D. Vance had humiliated, I thought, the reporters by going over to where they were standing outside Air Force Two, Kamala, the vice president's plane, and kind of trolling them. This is that clip, cut 2.
I know you're covering the vice president here. I figured I'd come by and one, just get a good look at the plane, because hopefully it's going to be my plane in a few months, but I also thought you guys might get lonely because the vice president doesn't answer questions from reporters and hasn't for 17 days. Have they given you guys an explanation for why she won't take questions from reporters? No? Nobody? Okay, great. Well, I hope that she changes her mind, because it'd be good for the American people, and I think it'd be good for you all if she actually ran a real campaign instead of one from a basement with a teleprompter. So have a good one, guys. See ya.
Well, I love about that is the reporters are humiliated. They won't talk to him. They won't answer him. They won't joke with him. They back up when he comes at them as if he's attacking them. It's really quite amazing that reporters who used to be very aggressive, used to be working class guys who would take down the power, have now become part of the power structure and are helping to create this Hollywood dream of who she is. So the result is this is a clip of women on the street being asked about Kamala. And you could do this to anybody in a way if you pick the people out. But this really matters. This really does reflect something. Just play this clip. It's cut 14 of a woman. I wish I could credit the person who it is. I do not know who this is, but she's asking people on the street about Kamala Harris.
So what do you think of her? Is she doing a good job in office?
Yeah, I think so. I really like her.
Great representation. I feel like definitely it's amazing to have a woman vice president.
Pretty solid job.
I really do agree with a lot of the policies she's been putting out, and I think she's a great vice president.
What policies specifically do you agree with?
I don't really know. Can you tell me some? Maybe I don't know what her policies are.
Can you name any specific accomplishments that you're super proud of?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of many of them.
I can't really, to be totally honest. What I really like is that she does kind of give the nation a positive face, being the first woman president.
No, not any specific ones particularly, no.
So then what do you like about her?
Just I think she's doing a good job.
What specifically do you like about her?
So if you don't follow politics, you are at the mercy of people creating imaginative images of the world in your head. And if you could probably find Trump supporters who would be like that too, who wouldn't know what Trump stood for. But the difference is this. Go on the Trump website, okay? If you go on the Trump website and his agenda is up there. You can see his agenda. He calls it, I think, Agenda 47. And if you press the different things he's talking about, a stronger defense and so on, it goes to a white paper of the Republican platform. So it's very, very detailed. And he can talk about it. He's talked about it with reporters. Here's clip 21.
A lot of my people, a lot of the MAGA, as they call them, but the base. And I think the base is 75% of the country, far beyond the Republican Party, because we're a party of common sense, and I'm a person of common sense. I want to have low taxes. I want to have strong borders. I want to have a strong military so that China and Russia, look, they've allowed China and Russia to do the impossible combined.
If you go to Kamala Harris's website, it's all about who she is, what she's like, a kind of blurry idea of what she's done in the past. And okay, so the politicians, clean up their image, but there's nothing about what she's proposing to do. And what she's been doing is she's been having anonymous sources within her campaign tell the press, oh, she's changed her mind about this. She's changed her mind about that. She's stopped being such a radical. She's not banning fracking anymore. She's not, defunding the police anymore. None of that is happening. But you don't find any clips of Kamala Harris saying that. She is not saying that at all. And if you look at her website, there's nothing there. You don't know what she stands for. You don't know who she is. You have fallen into the clutches of an imagination machine, which is why Hollywood supports her, and the news media, which has become Hollywood, also supports her. And so let's talk a little bit about the process, because we saw it in high gear this week as Kamala Harris picked her VP. It's come to my attention that the average Joe doesn't eat half of the recommended serving sizes of fruits and vegetables in a day. Now, Joe, while many have told me I don't look a day over 35, I've been informed on the importance of making sure I'm staying on top of my health in my middle-aged years, because I'm planning to live to 400. With Balance of Nature fruits and veggies, there's never been a more convenient dietary supplement to ensure you get a wide variety of fruits and vegetables every day. Imagine trying to eat 31 different fruits and vegetables every day. That sounds miserable. It's also time consuming. But Balance of Nature provides an on-the-go solution by taking 31 different fruits and vegetables, freeze drying them, turning them into a powder, and then putting them into a capsule. It can't get more convenient than that. Go to balanceofnature.com and use promo code Klavan for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer, plus get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Klavan. All right, chapter 2, tear down that walls. So they threw Josh Shapiro under the bus. They didn't pick Josh Shapiro as a running mate. Obviously, the best choice for a Democrat. Actually, I kind of like the guy. He's a little bit more responsible to reality in an important swing state, Pennsylvania. But just he was too Jewy for the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party, and I was picking on Shapiro pretty hard in the opening satire. But it's a satire, A, and B, he deserves it. He deserves it. When he basically would not own his old op-ed about the fact that it's hard to have a two-state solution when one state wants to slaughter the other state. You know, in one sense, that's not so bad, such a bad thing to do. He wrote it when he was 20. Maybe his opinions have changed. His party, the Democrat Party, is seething, bubbling, frothing with anti-Semitism. And as I have said on the show many times, and will say many times again, anti-Semitism is a hatred of God. The reason people cannot get over their hatred of Jews has nothing to do with the Jews. It has to do with hating the big Jew, the God of Abraham and Isaac, incarnate in Jesus Christ. This is who people who hate Jews hate. And that is why, on the right, for instance, I don't give these guys any quarter. I'm not interviewing them. I'm not giving them oxygen. I'm not saying a nice word about them. I despise them. I despise them, and I will not allow them to become part of the conversation because I know who they really hate, and I don't care what they say, and I don't care how they phrase it, and I don't care, oh, I was just saying this, or I was just doing this, and I just a little innocent remark. Baloney, baloney. You stand up against those guys, you spit in their eye, they deserve it. He should have done it. Josh Shapiro should have done it, and shame on him for backing down at all. Those were the words that should have come out of his mouth. So instead, they pick Tim Walz, and I don't know why. I keep calling him Al Walz. I don't know why that is, but he's Tim Walz, a very, very left-wing Minnesota governor who they suddenly, the press, you'll remember when they vetted J.D. Vance and said he was weird. They really did some really important work and said how weird he was. We played an entire montage of reporters saying he was weird. Fortunately, they have honest reporters like George Stephanopoulos who actually vetted this guy and really got some hard stuff on him. Here he is talking about this pick. This is Cup 13.
Walz appears to fit the all-American definition of a man from middle America. High school teacher, football coach, member of the Army National Guard before becoming a member of Congress and now governor.
Exactly. He really has that perfect backstory. He also has those rural roots, and he's really emerged as the dark horse in this Veep Stakes race. He has emerged as the favorite very recently as he has been on the cables, on the network, showing that he can effectively push back on those Republican attacks.
Wow. Really incisive, incredible reporting, really getting under, just getting under the facade to see the absolute perfection underneath. Now, you have to admit that George Stephanopoulos did take time off from silencing victims and intimidating victims and going to parties honoring Jeffrey Epstein and silencing stories about Jeffrey Epstein so that Hillary Clinton wouldn't be embarrassed, to do this. So it did take him some time away from his main occupation and the way he made his bones. But still, it does raise questions. Are there things about Tim that we might want to know that have been left behind? So right now, the big story going on at this moment is a story I'm not that interested in, but I think we should talk about it. It's the story of stolen valor, which means obviously pretending you have had military experiences that you haven't had, wearing a uniform, medals, pretending you're a veteran or pretending you were in wartime. And Walz was in the National Guard for 24 years, and just before his Guard unit was deployed overseas to the Middle East, he stepped out to run for Congress. And a lot of people in his unit, some people in his unit feel he was deserted, that he ran for the hills and all this stuff. The press is defending him, saying the official notice that his unit was going to be deployed came after he applied to be set free from the National Guard. But that's baloney, because he knew what was going to happen. Everybody knew after 9/11 what was going to happen. But I'm a little hesitant. I'm going to let the soldiers talk about that, because I was never a soldier. I didn't serve. And so he did, Walz did serve, and I'm not going to denigrate his service. However, honesty does matter. Honesty matters. And he showed up at a protest with a sign saying he was a veteran of Operation Enduring Freedom, the Afghan war, which he wasn't. And in trying to grab people's guns, he has repeatedly made statements like this, cut 10.
I spent 25 years in the Army, and I hunt. And I gave the money back, and I'll tell you what I have been doing. I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment, but we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
All right, so weapons of war that I carried in war. He did not carry weapons in war. And here's J.D. Vance, who was a Marine in Iraq, said this, cut 11.
He said we shouldn't allow weapons that I used in war to be on America's streets. Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone? What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not. And if he wants to criticize me for getting an Ivy League education, I'm proud of the fact that my mamaw supported me, that I was able to make something of myself. I'd be ashamed if I was him and I lied about my military service like he did.
I'm sorry, but the media, some of the people in the media, and CNN, I believe, disgraced themselves by denigrating Vance's service, which is ridiculous, because he was not a combat. He was not, he was a reporter, a PR guy, but still he was there, and anybody who was there is a hero as far as I'm concerned. And like I said, I'm not going to criticize Walz for service. I'm going to say this, though. 2008, I was embedded very briefly for maybe, I can't remember, a week to 10 days in Fob Kalagush in Afghanistan with the 101 Airborne. And they liked me because I was a reporter who actually admired them and respected them. And so as their kind of mascot, they gave me a T-shirt that says 101 Airborne. I love that T-shirt. I cherish it. I have never worn it out of the house. I would never wear it out of the house. I would never want anyone to think I was claiming to be that. I mean, I love it as a souvenir, but to make it believe that you were in combat is a bad thing. I won't quite call it stolen valor, but I will call it ugly, creepy stinkiness. I think that's a word, right? Ugly, creepy stinkiness. I think we can go with that. That tells us about his character. And really, I think that's bad. But ultimately, with these guys, it's all about the policies. Now, he waited 3 days during the George Floyd riots, the mostly peaceful George Floyd riots, before he called in the National Guard to stop Minneapolis from being burned to the ground. The mayor, Jacob Fry, I believe it's pronounced, also a Democrat, was calling him desperately. The police chief was calling him desperately. He was saying, well, this is not an official request. He kept making excuses. When he was urged by President Trump to do it, he finally did do it. He finally sent them in. But according to the New York Post, his daughter was given classified information and told where the deployment would be of the National Guard. And so the rioters knew where they were going to be before they got there. Now, they released, I should just mention quickly, they released an edited tape. The Kamala Harris campaign released an edited tape of Trump saying, you did a great job. But the whole tape, if you listen to the entire tape, what Trump is saying is, after I told you what to do, then you did a good job. And then really he's saying the National Guard did a great job. But something he said is more important than the fact that he didn't, is why he didn't do it. And this is cut 5, and he's explaining why he didn't send the Guard in to stop Minneapolis, St. Paul from burning to the ground, which it did.
In a moment that is so volatile, anything we do to add fuel to that fire is really, really challenging. So as I said, I spoke to the president. He pledged his support of anything we need in terms of supplies to get to us. There's a way to do this without inflaming. And again, this one is so difficult. As I said again, the tools of restoring order are viewed by so many as the things that have oppressed and started this problem in the first place. So
he is essentially accepting the argument of the George Floyd rioters, who they're saying defund the police. And remember, it's, a lot of these rioters are outside agitators. They're people who move from place to place. They're leftists who move from place to place in black bloc with masks on, so nobody can tell who they are and trace them to their homes. But he's accepting their idea that to have law and order in a community is somehow oppressive, which is an amazing, amazing idea when applied to a race. When you say in this particular race, the black race, if you have law and order, that is oppressive to them. It's essentially calling them a gang of criminals. It's disgusting. But this is the argument of the left, and that was Governor Walz, Governor Mostly Peaceful, was accepting that idea. Now, here is his wife speaking, and normally I won't pick on a candidate's wife, but this is so atrocious and so obviously a part of their combined ethos that I think it is worth hearing. This is her reaction to the riots, cut 8.
I would say those first days, when there were riots, I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
I mean, it reminds me of Apocalypse Now. Remember, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. I love the smell of America burning in the morning. And I'm sorry, she said later, clarified later, that she really did believe that America deserved this, that this was something that had to happen. This was a result of the complete injustice of the way police officers treat Black American citizens. And of course, this was the attitude of the left and the news media, but I repeat myself, right? And CBS News, in one of the most embarrassing interviews, I can't say it was one of the most embarrassing interviews because it was an interview on CBS News. They're all embarrassing. They interviewed Nicole Hannah-Jones of the 1619 Project, where she claimed basically America was formed to protect, we rebelled against the British to protect the slave trade, which is complete nonsense. It was a complete lie, and she lied that she lied, and then she lied that she lied, she lied. Unbelievable. And this is what she said during the riots. This is cut 6.
Violence is when an agent of the state kneels on a man's neck until all of the life is leached out of his body. Destroying property which can be replaced is not violence. And to put those things, to use the exact same language to describe those two things, I think really it's not moral to do that.
Okay, so I'm making a point here, so you got to keep all of these in mind. What we have is Governor Walz saying that we can't send in the National Guard because the people rioting, that's the thing they're rioting about, so we have to accept their narrative that this is oppressive. You've got his wife saying, I love the smell of America burning, and we really deserve this. And then you have Nicole Hannah-Jones, this absolute she's a bigot. She's a bigot. She hates white people. She's an angry, angry person willing to do anything to get at white people. And the things she has written are untrue, and they've been pushed into the schools to pollute the minds of children. A really bad character, in my opinion. So you have all those people sort of expressing one thing, and here's a lady on the ground in a wheelchair, a handicapped person who lives in Minneapolis and was there during the riots. This is during the riots, while the riots are happening. And let's just get her point of view on the ground for just a minute. It's cut 7.
How was last night?
Scary. I live in the high-rise right back here, and I seen them as they came down Lake Street. But then they turned and started coming over here, and I'm sitting out looking out my window. And they went straight to Office Max, the dollar store, and every store over here that I go to. I have nowhere to go now. I have no way to get there because the buses aren't running. These people did this for no reason.
It's the only reality that you've heard in this narrative. The only reality is people suffering on the ground because their neighborhood is being burned down. And you can say, oh, that's not violence because an individual isn't being hurt. But of course, many people were hurt in these riots. It has nothing to do with that. But still, property is part of people's lives. It's their dreams. It's where they get their medicines. It's where they get their foods. It's how they build their businesses, how their community is held together, how their community brings money into the area. And these places don't heal. Places destroyed by riots do not heal for a very, very long time. There's now a George Floyd Square in Minneapolis. You can't go there. The crime is so high. The cops won't go there because the crime is so high. And the George Floyd narrative is in itself a fantasy. He died because he shoved a bunch of fentanyl in his mouth to avoid being caught with it by the police. They put this poor cop away for murder, which is insane. And the idea that even, let's just say the cop had murdered him. Let's just say he had stone cold murdered him. That would not be indicative of the way the police treat Black people in this country. There is high crime in poor Black neighborhoods, and that means the police have dealings with Black people, and there's more high crime in Black neighborhoods than in other neighborhoods, and that means the police are frequently dealing with Black people. That's a tragedy, but it's not the cop's fault. The cop is the last guy. The cop is just catching the bad policies that come down his way. He's not doing anything wrong. He's just trying to keep the place together. For whom? For the people who live in the neighborhood, like that lady who are the victims of the crime. So the entire thing is a fantasy, except for the suffering of that poor lady. He has an abortion law that allows abortion up until a minute before birth. And abortion is a kind of a fantasy, too. You know, Bill Maher said something the other day. I don't know if I've played this clip yet, but it's a riveting clip because Maher is basically an honest guy. He's an honest observer, even though I think he's sometimes ill-informed. I almost never agree with his politics. I think he leads a very specific kind of life that doesn't speak to the life that is good for and healthy for most people. But this is what he said about abortion to a panel of people with a range of views. Cut 17.
I can respect the absolutist position. I really can. I scold the left on when they say, oh, you know what? They just hate women. People who aren't pro-life, pro-choice. They don't hate women. They just made that up. They think it's murder. And it kind of is. I'm just okay with that. I am. I mean, there's 8 billion people in the world. I'm sorry, we won't miss you. That's my position on it.
Now, the amazing thing is, as the clip goes on, people are appalled. Everybody on the panel, their jaws drop. And he goes, what? Isn't that what you believe? And of course, it is what they believe, but they live in a fantasy created by language that this is something, abortion is something other than what it is. And Tim Walz has signed into law this abortion law that essentially allows infanticide. And this is why language has to be policed. This is why you get stuff like this from Governor Mosley. Listen to this, what he said about free speech, cut 9.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
So you can't say anything about our democracy if it's hate speech. Hate speech, of course, everything is hate speech to somebody. Hate speech is, of course, the most protected speech. But this is what they're working on. And here is a wonderful clip. This came out from Red State, I believe. I hope that's right. It's Rob Flaherty, who's on Biden's digital team, talking about how they intimidated social media into pulling things down that they thought were misinformation, namely the truth. Listen to this, cut 18.
We brought Becca on to sort of think through, okay, now that we have these misinformation narratives, what do we actually do? It is one thing to know that there is a lot of conversation online about corruption or mental fitness or any of these things, the vice president's record on the crime bill, which was sort of a controversial piece of legislation in the early 90s. But it was another to go, okay, now what?
See, now what? And what they did is they intimidated people, which the Supreme Court has said was fine with them. They intimidated social media into taking this stuff down. You have to lie. If you're creating a fantasy, ultimately you're going to have to lie and you're going to have to silence anyone who tells the truth. And this is the reality of these people running for president. And this is why I'm concerned that Trump gets his game back and pulls himself together because, listen, we're depending on him. We're depending on him to stop these people. And I know many of you love him, but many people hate him. And I think that that's just an important thing to remember. I think he's still ahead in terms of the independents, but he's going to have to do a good job. He's in a fight. He is in a fight now. There's no question about it. He shouldn't be. It shouldn't be true, but this is the way it is. Here's the thing, though. There is such a thing as reality, and reality does have a voice, and reality does ultimately speak up. The question is, will it speak up in time? Let's take a look for a minute at what the reality is. A few years back, members of the world's elite met at the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and launched the Great Reset Initiative. That's right, the Great Reset. Sounds ominous. But what exactly is their plan, and what does it mean for America? They aim to transform the world economy. As Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive director of the forum, wrote, "We need a great reset of capitalism. If successful, their plan would destroy our American way of life." Hillsdale College, you've heard me talk about them before. I love these guys. I taught there for a couple of weeks. Great place. They held a conference on the Great Reset, and you can view and learn from the speakers through an online video series. Hillsdale's video series will give you insight into the origins and leaders of the Great Reset, how the ideology of woke capitalism is infiltrating large corporations, the Great Reset from China's perspective, alternatives to the Great Reset, and more. If you believe that our country's founding principles of liberty have made it the freest and most prosperous nation in history, or you're alarmed by the growing influence of the so-called global elite like I am, then Hillsdale College's video series is a must-watch. Get instant access to the Great Reset video series today by going to hillsdale.edu/Klavan. It's free, it's easy to sign up, and you know it's worth your time because it's from Hillsdale. Go to hillsdale.edu/Klavan, hillsdale.edu/ how do you spell that word? It's a mystery, but I'll solve it for you. It's Klavan.
There are no easy things.
Chapter 3, Rich Men's Dreams. We are seeing something going on. It's kind of two elections at once, two fights at once. Let's call it that. We're seeing, of course, the battle between Trump and Harris, the fight between the Democrat-Republican Party, but we're also seeing a war within the Republican Party. Trump is remaking the party into a party of the working class, what he's calling a common sense party. One of the many fantasy phenomenons you see, the phenomenon of the news media creating a fantasy, shows you that the fantasy is not entirely a lie, because sometimes they think the fantasy is real. Oftentimes, I think people think their fantasies are real. And one of the things that has been kind of horrible but sort of funny at the same time is the press lecturing the people about how good the economy is and why don't you see how good the economy is. They keep saying this, economy's great, it's great, why are you complaining, why are people blaming Biden, he's got such a great economy? And the reason is this: inflation has been terrible and it has not gone down, okay? The rate of inflation has gone down, but the prices haven't gone down. Now, if you're a rich person, like many of the people in the press, or at least a person who's doing really well, like many of the people on TV, and certainly the people who own the venues that those people are working for, you're not hit by inflation in the same way. Inflation will eventually eat away at the profits you make on your investments, but it's going to take more time. It's going to take time for that to happen. If you have investments, your investments are going to outstrip probably the rate of inflation, but the rate of inflation will take those profits away from you over time. If you're living on a salary and you don't have investments, then it's happening now. Now. You have the same amount of money today, the same price salary you have today that you had yesterday, but suddenly it's not buying as much. And in fact, under the Biden administration, real salaries have gone down because of inflation. So that means that, say, there is all this money in the economy and the stock market has been doing very well, but 80% of the country is suffering, while 20%, the people who are represented by the press and the Democrat Party, are thriving. And this is the big change, okay? So the big change is that the press is representing the elite. That was not always the case, and it is the case now. This is now a press that is of the power, for the power, by the power. It is for people who have money. They think the economy is great. They are living with investments. Things are going good. Everything looks things are more expensive, but they can afford it. It doesn't matter. Whereas if you're a working class guy, if you're collecting a salary, not so much. Now, this week we had a scare, right? And it shows you how delicate the illusion is. On Friday, things became worse for middle America's economic concerns. I think I'm reading this from Town Hall. When the latest jobs report for July showed up that not only has job growth slowed to an alarming number, only adding 114,000 jobs on a seasonally adjusted basis, when experts had been expecting 176,000 jobs. These experts are expert in nothing. They're never right. But the June and May job reports were revised lower by 29,000 jobs. This means that 10 of the last 14 reports have now been revised lower. Well, stocks plummeted. It was like bang. And yes, they have recovered. They've come back. But that shows you how delicate this is as soon as reality strikes. As soon as reality strikes and people don't have jobs and people are not hiring anymore because the people in small businesses are down the scale and are feeling the weight of inflation, suddenly things are bad. Suddenly everybody knows, all the investors know, I'm getting out of here. This is bad news. So it's all an illusion, but the people who are manufacturing the illusion know somewhere in their heads that it's an illusion. You know, if you ever wonder, why does socialism always end up like this? Why does it always end up helping the elites? So they're going to help everybody. We're going to give the same, everybody's going to be equal. And somehow the elites wind up with all the money. And the reason is this: money can be distributed in one of two ways. It can be distributed to all, or it can be distributed to each. If it's distributed to each, you get it through your job, through your investments, through the things that you do, the risks that you take, and it's awards merit. It rewards, you know, even if you invent something stupid like a pet rock, you get the money. The money is in each person is getting the money. If it's distributed to all, somebody has to do the distributing, right? If we distribute it to all, somebody does the distributing. Who's going to do that? It's going to be the government. And once the government has that power to distribute that money, it's not making any money, but it needs more and more money to keep people being paid. So it has to keep taking money away from the people who make the money and giving it to people who don't have the money. And ultimately, as Margaret Thatcher said, you run out of other people's money. The Democrat Party, this is the real story. The reality has become the party of the rich, of the elites. It has become the party of the people with PhDs. It's become the party of people with investments. They don't know the economy stinks. Henry Olsen, who has been talking about this, he's a friend of the show, a good guy, and a guy who reads numbers really well. He wrote a piece for the New York Post because he's been calling for the Republican Party to take a Ronald Reagan attitude to the working man, which was to support the working man and realize he does sometimes need help from the government, not be so absolute about no welfare state and all that. And that's why he kind of likes, no matter how he feels about Trump personally, he understands why Trump is so popular. He wrote a piece for the New York Post this week saying, well-off and connected elites tend to use their power to obtain special favors like the massive subsidies universities have secured or the public investments big tech got in the Chips and Science Act. The elites live in neighborhoods protected by restrictive zoning laws and work in occupations shielded by expensive licensing requirements. Their capture of American government, mainly through their chosen agent, the Democratic Party, has meant the last 20 years have worked out pretty well for them. They don't want change and will fight change agents at any cost. They're living the dream. They are literally living the dream. And when reality comes to call in the pain and suffering of working class people, they don't want to know. And that's what's happened in Minnesota, where Walz has been government. They have a low unemployment rate, but that's because they've got all this job growth in industries that are subsidized by government spending, like healthcare and social assistance. So they're doing well there. But private industries in Minnesota have lost jobs. High taxes have chased people away. People are leaving the state in droves. Households, this is from the Wall Street Journal, with roughly $5 billion in adjusted gross income, left Minnesota between 2019 and 2022. According to the most recent IRS data, Minnesota in 2022 ranked 8th in income loss among states as a share of overall income. And so, you know, this is the thing. People are moving to states where they don't tax people so high and they don't give their money away. They don't redistribute their money because it always ends up serving the powerful. It always ends up serving the powerful. And that is why socialism sounds so much nicer than fascism, but it always ends up as fascism. So let me end this segment. What I'm telling you is we're in a fight between the elites and the working man. And that's why Trump is under fire from the right as well. The Wall Street Journal is a pure capitalist. Why are you putting tariffs on and ruining our profits? They don't understand Trump's attempts to keep jobs here in the United States. They don't care because the globalists are going to make more money. You're going to make more money with global industries than you are with industries that are responsible to the neighborhoods that they serve. Now, we are in tons of debt. And ultimately, yes, the debt comes due, but it doesn't come due for us yet because we are our currency is the main currency in the world. So as long as our currency is respected by everybody, people will still keep coming to us and our currency will have the value of people coming to us. But the debt was bad under Trump. but it has been much worse over Biden. Accounting for the changes in cash balances at the Treasury, the debt actually rose $6.5 trillion during Trump's entire term, which is horrible, but it's up $7.9 trillion in less than 4 years of Biden's tenure. So that's telling you this debt is terrible. However, if you think about it for a minute, you might say to yourself, well, if we print our own money and we print as much money as we want, why do we have to borrow? Why do we go into debt, right? If we can just print the money and everybody respects it, why are we in debt? Why do we have to borrow? Why don't we just print the money? Well, luckily, we have Jared Bernstein, who is Kamala Harris's one of her chief economic advisors and the head of the Biden-Harris administration's Economic Advisory Council. And he was asked this exact question: if we print the money, why do we have to borrow the money? Here's Jared Bernstein, the Biden-Harris Economic Advisor Council chairman.
The government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do? They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Because they sell bonds, and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah. So a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to, I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Cause it's like the government clearly prints money. It does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
As you can see, we're totally screwed, because when you live in a fantasy and reality calls, these guys have no clue. Men. Have you heard of Rose Sparks? This dual-action prescription merges the powerhouse ingredients found in generic Viagra and Cialis, sildenafil and tadalafil, into one formidable treatment. But it's not merely about the ingredients in the medication, it's how you take it. That's why Rose Sparks are designed to dissolve under your tongue. That's huge, because dissolvable treatment hits your bloodstream faster than old-school pills. Rose Sparks keeps you present with your partner instead of waiting for a pill to work. Rose Sparks leverages the benefits of sublingual administration, meaning the tablets dissolve under your tongue. This method allows for fast absorption directly into the bloodstream, bypassing the digestive system, and the result is quicker onset of action, reducing the wait time typically associated with traditional pills. Plus, tadalafil, the active ingredient in Cialis, lasts in the system for up to 36 hours, so when the mood is right, you'll be ready without another dose. For treatment that works fast and lasts long, connect with a provider at ro.co/Klavan to find out if Rose Sparks are right for you. That's ro.co/Klavan. Again, that's ro.co/KLAVAN. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Only available if prescribed after an online consultation with a provider. All right, final chapter of The Real Deal. So on this show, I frequently talk about God. And I talk about God for a different reason than most conservatives talk about God. Most conservatives talk about God because they feel that religion has a good effect on society, which is true, and it will make you happier and all of those things. But none of that would mean a thing to me if there were no God. I talk about God because I believe that God is a fact of life, that there is a God, and that means God is reality. And if you do not live in reality, you will not be free. I mean, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free, but the truth is a truth about reality. And I think that we're living in a time of faith crisis, of faith withdrawing, the long withdrawing roar of faith, and that has an effect because it means that people have lost their faith in something that is actually there, and that is going to have an effect on your mind and on the way you behave. Now, I was thinking a lot about this Olympic Last Supper with the drag queens imitating the Last Supper, and I was thinking about how ugly anti-Christian art is. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember a thing called Immersion 1987. It was a big controversy in Giuliani's New York because it was funded with public funds, I believe, and it was just a crucifix sunk in urine, in a tub of urine. And then there was one in 1996 with the Virgin Mary smeared with elephant dung and patches of pornography. And then there was this Olympic Last Supper. And it's just incredibly ugly, which is part of the idea that there is no ugliness or beauty. These are all things that we invent and we can change them. There is no good or bad. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. All of reality is taking place in our mind. And if you've ever read this wonderful epic poem, Paradise Lost, it's about Satan's rebellion against God. And Satan makes the same point. And he says to God, I don't care if you send me to hell because the mind can transform hell into heaven. And then Satan finds out that the problem with this idea is that it's not true. And he ultimately says, wherever I go, it's hell. He says, myself am hell. And the reason for that is if you rebel, if you exclude the source of all goodness, you are going to only be left with hell in your own mind. The mind is in collaboration with God, is in collaboration with reality. So Nietzsche said the same thing as Satan. He said, God is dead. That means we have to become God, and a man who is strong enough, an Ubermensch, a Superman, he can now transvalue all values and create a new morality instead of this slavish morality of Christianity where you're being all Jewy and being nice to poor people and, all those things that the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jesus Christ want you to do, and you're not being a warrior and you're not being strong and you're not doing the natural things that people do, but you're doing something very different. And this is in the entire postmodern world that is the world you are reading when you read the New York Times, when you watch network news. A lot of the people there are not smart enough to know what postmodernism is or educated enough to know what postmodernism is, but they were taught by people who knew, and they were taught by postmoderns who essentially were saying all of the values can be transformed by us. They were telling them what Satan's told God in Paradise Lost, that doesn't matter if you send us to hell because we can turn hell into heaven, because they're no longer dealing with the reality that there is a moral world, that there is such a thing as beauty. Beauty is not just in the eye of the beholder. Beauty is created in the eye of the beholder because beauty is a human thing, but it is the human translation of something that is really there, namely creation. Creation is beautiful when you see it rightly. It's the same thing with morality. Morality is a human thing, but it is a human translation of something that is really there, namely God's order, the order that God wants things to be in. So when you say all of these things, I'm going to disappear from all these things, I'm not going to support all these things that are really there because they're really just in my mind, I'm not in collaboration with reality, you lose touch with reality. You can't bear, as T.S. Eliot wrote, you cannot bear too much reality because it brings you back to the fact that you're doing something wrong. When suddenly somebody says, well, how exactly is a baby not a human being? And Bill Maher says, well, it is kind of murder, but I'm okay with it. And everybody is shocked. And you think, well, why are you shocked? Because you can't bear the reality because you thought you could reinvent reality. This leads me back to something I said last week, and I just want to reiterate it. Every value that the left puts forward always turns into something else. Feminism starts out with women want to do what they want. It ends up with women don't exist and can be replaced by men, and being a homemaker stinks, right? Racial justice starts out with blacks saying we want to join America, ends up with black activists saying America stinks because it's racist. It's always been racist. We don't want any part of it. Gay rights start with we just want to be able to visit our partners on their deathbed. We don't want to interfere with your lives, with your straight lives. It ends up with the children have to be queer and they have to read gay porn so they live in the world that we want them to live in. So all of this stuff is evil, but they never get to the evil until the last step. And that's because none of it is about gay people or black people or women. It's all about the leftism. It's all about keeping that power, keeping that wealth. That's the reality. That is where the reality lives. It lives in that coagulation, that collection of wealth. And that's why you see this really, really weird thing happening in the creation of our fantasies that's going on in the news media, in the New York Times, on the networks, where they're lying and lying and lying to us. First, Joe Biden is the smartest guy in the room. Then he's a drooling idiot, so he's got to resign. Then he resigns. He's George Washington. Washington because he's just so selfless that he just resigned off his own bat. And suddenly Kamala Harris, who the day before was the most unpopular person in America, suddenly is a wonderful person. It's just joy, joy, joy that we have her. And that's why you're seeing this, because they're selling you something that's bad, but they want you to know it's good. So they're constantly saying to you that, feminism is good, women are absolutely equal, but you can't insult them because they're ladies, so don't do that. And they're constantly saying, oh, promiscuity is good, but what a terrible guy Trump is for sleeping around. Gay is good. It's good to show kids gay porn, but you can't read the porn in a school meeting because it's disgusting. Why is that? Why do they keep telling us, oh, Tim Walz, he's a moderate, he's a folksy Midwestern grandpa, he's a moderate. Well, if being a progressive is so good, why not just say, yeah, he's one of us. We love this stuff. And the only reason is they despise you. They despise the working class guy, the ordinary guy, the guy who likes the ordinary guy, the guy who wants the normality to exist and to be the centerpiece of the world. They despise you because they think you're not smart enough to see the beautiful heaven they are making of hell with the power, the immense power of their own minds. Satan ultimately in Paradise Lost corrupts Adam and Eve because he can't stand the fact that the world exists and makes him look like the liar he is. That is the phenomenon we're seeing here. When you abandon God, you abandon the truth. And when you abandon the truth, you think you can create the truth. And when you find out you can't, you got to keep lying and lying and lying and get everybody else to lie in the hopes that if everybody's lying, the truth will suddenly manifest itself out of lies. Lies will suddenly become the truth. But you know what? Then you are left with a world that is only about forcing people to agree, silencing people who disagree. You're left with a world that is in fact a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's all about power, and that power is about keeping the truth suppressed and everything else. But that authoritarianism, that fascism, that communism, everything but that is in fact a fantasy. I know you remember the incredible Matt Walsh film, What is a Woman? Well, Walsh got the same group of white guys back together to ask America's next burning question, am I racist? And yes, he is, and the film is coming to theaters this September. Matt went deep undercover into the cesspool of DEI insanity, rubbing elbows with professional race hustlers and diversity con artists. Some would say he did the work. Now it's your turn. But the date I need you to remember right now is Thursday, August 15th. That's when pre-sale tickets go on sale. With your help, we're going to stick it to the woke mob one ticket at a time. Get all the details and watch the official trailer. It's great. Watch the trailer at www.amiracist.com. Klavan Klapbacks.
She was everybody's favorite Hindu Indian prosecutor. How did she get to be black?
It is the question. All right. Last week I was talking about evolution. I got a lot of pushback on that, a lot of clapbacks. And here is one from David who says, Dr. K, you are a wonderful writer, great satirist, deep conservative thinker guided by sound Christian doctrine. You inform and entertain me and are the main reason for my DailyWire subscription, but you're not a scientist. You keep using that word evolution, but I do not think it means what you think it means. You cite, this is a little long, but I'm going to read as much of it as I can. You cite evolution in a way that suggests scientists believe evolution within species is an accepted fact. I challenge you to find any acceptable modern definition for the word evolution as it relates to biological change. There is no recognizable model where evolution describes the outcomes of origination or change in DNA, a living cell, or within or between species. My point, as Stephen Meyer has so well articulated, order in the universe, on earth, in man, and in the cell requires a designer, and the only designer capable of this is God. To suggest God somehow used evolution is to suggest God used a flawed mechanism. Random mutations of DNA over time are not observed to create positive change. Random mutations are noted to produce life-threatening results. Let evolution rest with Marxism and Freudian psychology in the graveyard of bad ideas. Respectfully, David. First of all, David, thank you for the kind words, and thank you for phrasing your disagreement in a civilized and generous way, and I really do appreciate that. I think it's a lovely thing. It speaks well of your character. Now, I disagree with you here on the facts. I think this is the thing. Well, I also disagree with philosophically a little bit, but let's just start with the facts. Evolution is defined as a change in heritable characteristics, so that their changes take place over time in what genes and characteristics are being passed down. So if you take squirrels who move, the gray American squirrel came into London where there's a lot more pollution, and over a couple of generations, the squirrel turned black, and now the squirrels in London are black. And that's true in Central Park too, where there's also more pollution, because over time the darker squirrels survived and reproduced, and so they got darker and darker, and that is how evolution works. And so evolution is a thing, and I think that most people believe that within species it can happen, and from species to species, there are many, many questions about it, but some people still are very firmly believing in it. But the bigger point for me is this. I'm willing to, evolution means nothing to me. I mean, it's what, it's what you're taught is happening. It doesn't mean a thing to me in terms of my faith, because God can use any mechanism he wants, whether we think it's flawed or not. Obviously, he thinks it's good if he's using it. That doesn't matter to me at all. But the thing is, what's going to change my mind about evolution is science. Now, the word science has been so misused, and the people who have used it have been so evil that it has been besmirched in the same way, for instance, a church is besmirched when its priests behave badly. But that doesn't mean the things that the church is saying are untrue. It means the priests have behaved badly. That's why in the Bible it's frequently saying, do this for Jesus' sake. That means for his good reputation. A lot of the moral instruction in the New Testament is about keeping Jesus' reputation clean. It's not because God is saying, oh, you did this, you did that, you're going to hell. That's not what it says. What it says is do this for Christ's sake, for Christ's reputation. And our scientists have besmirched science by doing evil things. But science is still the way we find out about how the material world works. And that tells us something about how God works, because it explains the mechanisms that he uses. It is not for me to dictate to God what mechanisms he uses. I trust that he is doing something way, way beyond my pay grade. I'm just a guess there, but still. And if it's evolution, that's fine with me. It does not threaten my world at all. I think if you think you are taking the Bible literally, and I've talked about this before, so I can't talk about it now, I'm running out of time, but if you think you're taking the Bible literally, it might threaten you, but it doesn't threaten me in the least. But again, thank you for your kindness of your letter, and I understand what you're saying. Become a member today, because we're going into member block, and you are going to be left Klavanless, which is one of the worst things that can happen to you. Take my word for this. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code Klavan at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans, so you don't have to experience what you're about to experience as the rest of us go into member block.
Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up, I never thought much about race. It never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me. Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey. If I'm going to sort this out, I need to go deeper undercover.
They gonna say I'm racist.
Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Here's my certification. And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you and less for you. Is America inherently racist?
The word inherent is challenging there.
I want to rename the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument.
America is racist to its bones.
So inherently.
Yeah, this country is a piece of shit.
White.
Folks.
White.
Trash. White supremacy. White woman. White boy.
Is there a black person around here? There's a black person right here. Does he not exist? Hi, Robin.
Hi. What's your name?
I'm Matt.
I just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
They gonna say you racist.
In theaters September 13th, rated PG-13.